We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? I give the call to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Labor's budget of broken promises and higher toxic taxes will impose $77 billion of new taxes on Australians. Why does this Prime Minister, the leader of this dishonest government, want to pull up the ladder on hard-working Australians?
Order. The member for Isaacs will leave the chamber under 94A. That means leave immediately. We're not having people yelling during questions. I've made that crystal clear all week. Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, we understand that Australians are under financial pressure, which is why we're not just identifying issues.
Order.
We're actually doing something about it. And in the Senate right now, there are bells ringing. And there are bells ringing. The bell is tolling for all those opposite. Because those opposite are voting in the Senate, all three right-wing parties, against tax cuts for every Australian. For every Australian worker.
Members on my left will cease interjecting. The member for Cook. Thank you. Prime Minister.
And just next week, Mr Speaker, there'll be a tax cut for all 14 million Australian taxpayers. We know that that is a change that was not only opposed by those opposite, they didn't just vote against it, they said they'd repeal it. We know that there'll be a real increase in the minimum wage. We know that those opposite have never supported minimum wage workers. We know there's expansion of paid parental leave to a full 6 months. We know as well that from next week, our 137 Medicare urgent care clinics will be made permanent. Now, this is a time of significant global uncertainty. The war in Iran has caused the biggest spike in the price of petrol and diesel in history, but Australia has shown remarkable resilience. In the data that's out just this month, economic growth is up, business investment is up, inflation is down, and today unemployment is down.
Order. Members on my
but
left.
Those opposite just talk Australia down at every opportunity, defined by what they're against. Now, the last time they asked a question about the impact of this global crisis from the Strait of Hormuz was the 1st of April, appropriately. The 1st of April. Since then, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here, just crickets from those opposite.
Order. The member for
Even though we have more fuel in Australia today than there was on February 28th. Even though prior to Easter they were saying it wasn't a case of whether there'd be rationing, it was what date or why it hasn't been done already, was what they were saying, Mr Speaker. The opposition have not asked a single question about this. They talk Australia down. We build Australia up.
Noise levels were a little too loud in that answer, so we're just I'm going to ask everyone to lower their interjections. We'll now hear from the honourable member for Bass.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. What action is the Albanese Labor government taking to help first home buyers into a home of their own? What approaches will make this harder for young Australians to get into home ownership?
Give the call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Speaker, thanks so much.
Member
and I
for
thank
Cowper. No, hang on a sec. Minister had not begun even saying something and you started interjecting. Just going to ask the House, for everyone, for both sides, just when a minister begins on, we're not having this. We'll reset and the minister will begin her answer.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and I want to thank the fantastic member for Bass for her question, and what a great contribution she is making representing her community in this parliament. Speaker, today the parliament has a very important bill before it, a bill that will deliver a tax cut for every single working Australian, and a bill that will level the playing field for Australia's first home buyers. Speaker, 27 years ago, Prime Minister John Howard and this parliament created a housing market in our country that preferences investors over first home buyers. And today, as a parliament, we have an opportunity to make a different choice for our country, because we know the results of John Howard's experiment. Investors flooded into established housing, house prices have gone up by 400%, home ownership rates for young people across this country have fallen through the floor. Now, Speaker, the bill that's before the parliament asks us a big question. What kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to be a nation where hard work and aspiration get rewarded, or do we want to be a country where getting into a home of your own depends on the property wealth you inherited from your parents? Speaker, Labor believes in an Australia where ordinary people can get ahead through their own effort. That's why we're giving first home buyers a fair shot, and that's why we're delivering a tax cut for every single working Australian. Now, I'm asked about alternatives, Speaker, and the three right-wing parties have a big choice to make this afternoon. With all the cost of living challenges facing this country, are they seriously going to come into the parliament and vote against a tax cut for every single worker in this country? Are they seriously going to come into the parliament, Speaker, and say we don't want our housing system to change? Because that's what this is about. Do we want our housing system to be fairer and more equal, or do we want to retain the broken system? Speaker, we are a Labor government. We believe that Australia works best when effort and aspiration are rewarded.
Manager of Opposition Business.
Speaker, helping more Australians buy their own home is not just central to our vision for housing, it is central to our vision for Australia. And that's what the bill today is about, building a country where your success comes not from the wealth you inherit, not from the family that you come from, but the work that you do yourself. In our government, we believe that aspiration belongs to every person who lives in this country.
Give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Today the Labor government has backflipped again, issuing an entry permit for yet another dangerous ISIS terrorist sympathiser to enter Australia. Last night, in his annual threat assessment, the Director-General of ASIO declared that Islamic State and al-Qaeda and their affiliates are growing their capability to conduct and inspire attacks. Why does the Prime Minister keep rolling out the welcome mat for ISIS terrorist sympathisers?
Order. Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'm asked about the statement, the annual threat assessments of the Director-General of ASIO, and as part of the question from the self-described newly elected Member of Parliament there. What he has done in the language that was used.
Order.
Sure words.
All right, we'll just get the Prime Minister to pause for a moment so I can hear the manager.
No member be referred to by name or other things. You've got to actually use correct titles. I can go through the correct titles you meant to use if it would help the House, but the Prime Minister is not doing that. Do you want me to do that? The member's ministerial office, the member's parliamentary office, or the member's electoral division. That is what you're meant to use.
Yeah, well, that's a good cue to remind everyone that language matters. So no matter what descriptors are being used, great. We're going to keep everyone just to their titles. Fantastic. The order. No, that's important. An important principle. So the Prime Minister will continue and address people by their correct titles.
Mr Speaker, the Director-General of ASIO's comments are worth reading. And I ask people to think about what the Director-General of ASIO has said and then the language that was just used in that question. He said this: I reckon a fair go for all could be a good place to start. I appreciate this is not traditional territory for a spy chief, but I firmly believe if more Australians, not just visitors, embrace the ethos of a fair go, mutual respect and tolerance, the temperature of our security environment would be several degrees lower. By all means disagree, but consider how we disagree. By all means protest, but consider how we protest. By all means report the news, but consider how you report the news. By all means condemn a government or a political party, but consider whether you should condemn a people. Despite the scale of this challenge, Australia is well placed to meet it. Our parliaments are sovereign, our communities are resilient, our economy is growing, and while we may not be perfect, our security and law enforcement agencies are world class. We should not be insecure about our security. We can and should have confidence in our ability to respond. Mr Speaker, the Director-General of ASIO has my absolute confidence, and the Director-General of ASIO is an extraordinary Australian who...
Order. We'll just wait. The Leader of the Opposition, a point of order.
Yeah, point of order is relevance, Mr Speaker. The question was about rolling the welcome mat out for ISIS terrorists.
Order. The member for Caldwell. Prime Minister is being directly relevant when the question contained the statement about the Director-General's of ASIO's statement last night. The Prime Minister is reading directly about that statement to the House. He couldn't be more directly relevant for a statement that he was asked about. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. And the Leader of the Opposition couldn't have more effectively outlined what the problem that the Director-General of ASIO was identifying. Because the idea that anyone in this parliament is not totally opposed to ISIS and terrorism is something that has no place in this parliament. And what the Leader of the Opposition knows is that one of the things that defines our country and distinguishes us from authoritarian regimes is the rule of law.
Prime Minister's time has concluded. Give a call to the honourable member for Maribyrnong.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How will the passage of the Albanese Labor government's tax reforms help Australians get ahead? How does this compare with other approaches?
The call to the Treasurer.
Speaker, for as long as I've known the member for Maribyrnong, she's stood up for and spoken up for workers, particularly low-paid workers and especially in the care economy. I thank her for her question. Now, Mr Speaker, this is a really important week for our economy and it's a big day for tax reform in particular. Yesterday we saw headline inflation go down. Today we saw the unemployment rate go down and employment go up. And this afternoon we passed the most ambitious tax reforms in more than a quarter of a century, Mr Speaker. Now, when it comes to those job numbers today, what they show is that more than 1.25 million jobs have now been created on this Prime Minister and this government's watch, most of them full-time, Mr Speaker. It means that average unemployment under our government is the lowest of any government in the last half a century, Mr Speaker. It's a very welcome reminder of the strength of our labour market and the resilience of our economy in the face of all of this global economic uncertainty. Now, Mr Speaker, this afternoon the House will have a very important choice to make. This side of the House will be voting for tax cuts for workers, a fair go for first home buyers and a fairer tax system, Mr Speaker. The three right-wing parties, united by their divisive anti-worker agenda, will be voting against tax cuts, against a fair go for first home buyers and against a fairer tax system. Mr Speaker, this legislation, which will pass the House this afternoon, is about making it easier for people to buy their first home, not their 20th investment property. It's all about cutting income taxes again and again, Mr Speaker, and it's about making that tax system fairer as well. Now, as important as this week is in our economy, Mr Speaker, next week will be just as important, because on Wednesday next week, more than 14 million Australian taxpayers will get another tax cut from this government. The national minimum wage goes up. Modern award wages go up. Parents will get 26 weeks of paid parental leave, up from 24 weeks, Mr Speaker, in addition to the usual indexation. We'll also have workers benefit from super being paid at the same time as their salary and their wages. We'll introduce the ban on excessive pricing of groceries, Mr Speaker, and people will start to get the benefit from the instant tax deduction as well, Mr Speaker. So this side of the House, very proud of the tax reforms that will pass the House later today, very proud of our efforts to cut income taxes again, make it easier for first home buyers and make the tax system fairer. The three right-wing parties in their usual way are trying to stand in the way of all of those things.
Before I call the member for Warringah, I have two acknowledgements to make. I have been planning to recognise local government people. I have about 350 people to acknowledge today, so I will acknowledge two people, Councillor Kim Marks from my hometown of Brisbane City Council and Councillor George Dimitri from the city of West Torrens. At 92 years of age, he is the oldest serving councillor currently in local government in the Southern Hemisphere. On behalf of all of the local mayors and councillors who are here, thank you for your service and welcome to Question Time. We'll give the call to the honourable member for Warringah.
To the Prime Minister, Australians want truth in political advertising laws. The bills I've tabled will require AI content watermarking, establish an ethical political advertising code, an independent political advertising standards board to regulate complaints, and introduce penalties for misleading and deceptive political content. At the 2025 elections, voters saw fake signs, false affiliations, AI content in Goldstein, a politically motivated complaints to the NAC, then used in political advertising to imply wrongdoing. When will the government act to protect our elections?
Order. Members can just cease interjecting for a moment. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you. I thank the member for Warringah for her question. I haven't considered the details in the bill that she refers to that she has tabled. I'm happy to have a look at it, as we're happy to consider any ideas going forward. Certainly the issue of political advertising is very real, and the issue of use of artificial intelligence is something that should be of concern across the parliament. The images which people can see in videos, for example, that have been published recently, showing various members of parliament and ministers when it isn't actually them. But for people who look at it, they can see them, they can hear their voice. And so this has the potential to really change the way that politics operates in this country. Politics does have to operate in a way where there is fairness and where people are able to see things that they know are real. And so we'll examine these things as something when it comes to artificial intelligence in general. Can I assure the member for Warringah that this has been the subject of substantial debates within the government and as well with the private sector and with the bureaucracy. I convened a meeting of half a dozen ministers just this week where across portfolios, looking at the challenges that it represents a real opportunity for growth, and you can't stop these technologies from emerging, which is why we need to make sure that we shape them rather than allow them to shape us in the way that our society operates. But we'll continue to work constructively across the parliament with all those who are prepared to work constructively across the parliament, and that includes the member for Warringah.
Get the call to the member for Bullwinkle.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government supporting local governments all around Australia to deliver more infrastructure, better services and greater prosperity for the communities that we all represent?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Bullwinkle for her question, and of course the member for Bullwinkle was a member of Mundaring Council in her local electorate.
Order. The House will come to order.
Importantly, I don't think she'll be rerunning in the next local government elections, because one job is enough for the member for Bullwinkle. Now, tonight I will have the pleasure of addressing the Australian Local Government Association.
Order. Members on my left.
It will be as...
Order. Members on my left are just interjecting non-stop. I will have to take action if that kind of level of noise continues. It's completely disrespectful. Everyone, House will come to order. The Prime Minister in continuation.
At the ALGA conference, I'll be able to talk about the respect that we have for local government, led by Minister McBain. Commonwealth investment in local government is not just growing, it is at a record level. Every dollar invested in local government helps councils deliver the services and the infrastructure that Australians rely on every day. Now, through last month's budget, our government is providing $3.6 billion.
Order. The Minister for Infrastructure and the Member for Parks are both now warned. Simply having that conversation while the Prime Minister is speaking, if you wish to do that, please take it outside. Prime Minister in continuation. No more interjections.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. We're providing $3.6 billion in untied financial assistance grants. Real money for real priorities. And last Friday we paid 80% of those financial assistance grants ahead of schedule.
No, the Prime Minister will pause. I just want... Thank you, Member for Parks, for... Order. If people are warned in an answer, obviously action will be taken, and so it should. Order. Prime Minister in continuation. Prime Minister.
When they're finished, Mr Speaker.
Order. Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. We're fast-tracking last-mile infrastructure funding for housing, part of our $47 billion Homes for Australia plan, $2 billion for the Housing Support Program. We have doubled funding for the Roads to Recovery program to $4.4 billion, a vital program. We've opened new opportunities for infrastructure funding, including the $500 million Active Transport Fund, the $200 million Safer Local Roads and Infrastructure program, and the $750 million Growing Regions and Thriving Suburbs program. In further recognition as well, we're continuing to engage with local government directly, and I know that the Minister has met with over 50 council representatives just this week. I welcome every delegate who's made the journey to the national capital. I know how deeply you care about your communities. When we work together, we achieve so much more for the people we so proudly represent and serve. I was very proud to be the local government minister in a former government. There's nowhere that's more important in which you can engage with local communities directly than through local government.
Call to the honourable member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. Yesterday, the Minister for Housing revealed Labor's budget of broken promises and higher taxes will see the value of an Australian home collapse by up to 20%. This could see negative equity loans rise to roughly 1 in 20 and leave homeowners owning more than their home is worth, smashing their nest egg. How many Australians will become poorer because of Labor's deliberate correction in house prices?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thanks, Speaker. Let me first start by saying that that is a characteristically dishonest representation of what I said in question time yesterday.
Order.
And, Speaker, I just point out to those opposite that if you
the
can't
member
win...
for Gippsland will leave the chamber under 94A. This continual rudeness will not be tolerated in this House. This non-stop interjecting, sledging is not acceptable.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
And I'd say to those opposite, if you can't win a political debate without misrepresenting the position of the people that you're arguing with, then you don't have a very good argument. That's just a hot tip on how arguments work.
Order. The Leader of the Opposition. Order. Everyone's just not going to continue to behave like that. Please, assist the House, show some respect. I want the Minister to return to the question and want the House to hear her answer. Minister.
Speaker, I talked to the parliament yesterday about what has happened to our housing market in this country since John Howard and Peter Costello reshaped our market in favour of investors over first home buyers. So let me take the parliament through it again. What we saw was investors flooding into the market, purchasing at 80 to 90% existing Australian properties. And the consequences of that are not altogether surprising, Speaker. What they have seen is a 400% increase in house prices since the last 25 years. Now, Speaker, those opposite may think that a 400% increase in house prices is a sustainable and good thing for the country. But let me be clear with you. The result of that is that home ownership rates for the young people of this country are falling through the floor. Speaker, a low-income young couple in this country is half as likely to own their own home today than they were in the year that I was born. Now, I'm not surprised that those opposite don't want to see change in this system.
Will cease interjecting or be warned, and he won't be here for the remainder of the answer. No more interjections. Minister.
I'm not surprised, Speaker, that those opposite don't want to see change in this system, though I do want to point out some inconsistency. It sounds like the member for Goldstein is advocating for another 400% increase in house prices, perhaps another halving of home ownership rate for young people. I would point out to him that his colleague and friend, the shadow housing spokesperson Andrew Bragg, is made quite clear his views that he wants house prices right around the country to decline. Not surprising to see more chaos and more crazy over there as they try to sort out their position, Speaker. They may be still sorting out what they think about what should happen with housing in this country, Speaker. We've got a really clear view. We want a fair and equitable housing market in this country, and that means putting first home buyers on an even keel with investors. If those opposite have a different view, they'll have the chance to state that again when they vote on this legislation this afternoon.
Call to the honourable member for Deakin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. What is the progress of the government's reforms to give first home buyers a fair go, to make the tax system fairer and to help people to earn more and keep more of what they earn? And what has been standing in the way?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Deakin, and I can tell the member for Deakin that our legislation has just passed the Senate. And this is legislation that will make Australia stronger, will make Australia fairer, and will indeed make Australia stronger because it is fairer. Now, most Australians have nothing to sell but their time, nothing to give but their hard work. They go to work each and every day to earn an income, to put food on the table for their families. They deserve a tax cut, and we are giving them one. Yeah. They deserve the opportunity to buy their own home, and we're making sure they have it. Our reforms are delivering both. delivering both.
Order,
and that is what delivering real change looks like. Fixing a broken system to give first home buyers a fair crack. And during this debate that has taken place all year about housing, the truth is that those opposite, and no one in this debate is arguing the housing system is working. Those opposite, though, say, even though they acknowledge it's not working, don't do anything about it. Well, that is not the Labor way. Governments are here to make a difference, not to just occupy the space. And we are making a difference, fixing a broken system to give first home buyers a fair crack. But we're not just doing that, Mr. Speaker. We are making sure that people can earn more and keep more of what they earn, earning more through the increases in the minimum wage. But the further tax cuts that are part of this legislation that those opposite and the three right-wing parties voted against in the Senate, and they'll have an opportunity, though, to change their mind in the coming period before it returns to the House, will give a $250 tax cut for every working Australian and a $1,000 instant tax deduction. And every single Labor member will be proud to vote for this legislation. Tax cuts for every working Australian, not just some. Backing aspiration for all, not just some. An economy that works for all Australians, not just some. And that's the difference between this side of the House and the three right-wing parties. They are anti-aspiration, anti-worker, anti-tax cuts, anti-first home buyers. They are defined only by what they are against. What we're defined by is what we're in favour of, a stronger and fairer economy that works for all Australians.
Call to the honourable member for Monash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. Reports say the government is backing down on another toxic tax hidden in Labor's budget of broken promises. Can the minister confirm thousands of Australian women, including widows, divorcees and victims of domestic violence, will be disproportionately impacted by Labor's rushed changes to property taxes due to pass the parliament today? Why won't this government delay this vote to fix this shambles of a budget?
Good question. Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and I thank the member for Monash for her really important question, and I think she'd be aware that the Minister for Finance has clarified the government's pathway on this in the Senate earlier today. We're aware of these issues and we're working through them in the usual manner, Speaker. We intend to address the arrangements for jointly owned assets in circumstances like inheritance and divorce in subsequent legislation. We'll also ensure that the exemption for income from genuine testamentary trusts applies to the minimum tax on capital gains, Speaker, so the Parliament will have the opportunity to debate and discuss that as the second tranche of legislation comes forward. Thanks.
Give a call to the honourable member for Hunter.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering higher wages and more jobs for working Australians, and what are the biggest threats to this record delivery?
We call to the Minister for Health and the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Hunter for his question and his ongoing support for workers right across the Hunter. Now, this Labor government is absolutely committed to creating more safe, secure jobs and helping more Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn. And in good news for Aussie workers today, the ABS jobs data highlights the resilience of Australia's labour market. Jobs are up, unemployment is down, with 40,000 more people in work over the month and the unemployment rate decreasing to 4.4%. And in good news, the total number of Australians in jobs is now over 14.7 million. Not only is this government delivering more jobs, but we're also backing hard-working Australians get the pay that they deserve. This Labor government has backed an increase to the minimum award wage every single year we've been in government. And in case you all have missed it, from next week the minimum award wage earners will be receiving a 4.75% increase, representing a real wage increase for these workers. Of course, and next week, working Australians will also get paid super when they get paid their wages. This is about ensuring workers do not miss out on their important superannuation entitlements. From next week, hard-working Australians will be getting a tax cut, with more to come with the legislation now passing the Senate. And from next week, eligible working families will be able to access up to 26 weeks of paid parental leave delivered by this Labor government. These changes are all part of Labor's commitment to ensure Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn and, of course, retire with more as well. Now, Speaker, I'm asked about the biggest risk to our record of delivering for workers. Well, it comes as no surprise. No surprise.
Order.
It's not even a surprise to those on the other side that the biggest risk to jobs and wages for everyday Aussies is the three right-wing parties on the other side. The Liberals, the Nationals and One Nation have consistently opposed cost of living relief for hard-working Australians. They've failed to back an increase to the minimum wage, and they've tried to block those tax cuts for hard-working Australians. While our government is working to deliver more jobs, One Nation and the Liberals have made it no secret they want to make it easier for bosses to sack workers. Well, it's only this Labor government that can be trusted to be on the side of Aussie workers.
The call to the member for Lyne.
My question is to the Treasurer. Yesterday, the Treasurer was asked about his plan to force thousands of widows and divorcees to pay more tax by removing their access to grandfathering for capital gains tax and negative gearing. He said, quote, "The arrangements as you describe them are consistent with the way that the acquisition rules apply in the current CGT arrangements." This morning, the Prime Minister had to step in again and dump the Treasurer's plan. How many more humiliating backdowns will it take for the Treasurer to admit his budget is a failure?
The call to the Treasurer.
I'll tell you what's humiliating, Mr Speaker, the Shadow Treasurer's inability to ask me a question himself.
Order.
Now, Mr Speaker, as I thank the honourable member for her question. As we said yesterday, the arrangements are consistent with treatment elsewhere in the tax system. But when we were asked about this yesterday, we did take particular care around our response because we were still considering the amendments that were being circulated in the Senate throughout the day. And that's why we provided the answer that we did at the time. We are and we have been, as the Housing Minister and the Finance Minister earlier today has said, we've been aware of these issues. We are working through them in the usual way. We do intend to address the arrangements for jointly owned assets in subsequent legislation. We'll also ensure that the exemption for income from genuine testamentary trusts applies to the minimum tax on capital gains as well, so that they work appropriately together. Now, we've made it clear on a number of occasions, Mr Speaker, and I think those opposite know this, that it's not unusual at all for big tax packages, reform packages, to be legislated with multiple pieces of legislation. The Howard government did it with the GST. The Howard government did it when they made this mistake on capital gains tax discount in 1999, something like 30 pieces of legislation on both occasions. So it's not unusual for there to be consultation. It's not unusual for there to be multiple pieces of legislation, and that's what we are doing in this instance, Mr Speaker. And I can hear the interjections from those opposite, and I think everybody here and everybody watching at home and in the galleries as well knows what's really happening here. They are trying to distract from the fact that when the bills come back down from the Senate, that they will vote against tax cuts for workers and a fair go for first home buyers, Mr Speaker. And that's what they're trying to obscure. They're desperately hoping that nobody notices that the three right-wing parties and their divisive anti-worker agenda will see them vote against tax cuts once again.
The Treasurer will pause. The Manager on a point of order.
Yes, thanks, Speaker. Relevance. The question was about the humiliating back down that you're now making. It wasn't about this.
Yes, the Manager is correct. He wasn't asked about the opposition or their positions. It was about government decisions. So I'll just ask the Treasurer to return to the question.
Thank you, Speaker. I was asked about the legislation before the Senate, and the legislation will be coming back down to the House this afternoon, and every member of this parliament will have an important choice to make, and I know what choice we'll be making. We'll be voting to support workers and first home buyers and future generations, Mr Speaker. That's who we will be supporting. Now, when this legislation comes down and when it passes this House, Mr Speaker, it will demonstrate this above all else. This tax reform bill passing the House today is a win for workers, it's a win for first home buyers, it's a win for future generations, and that's why we'll be voting for it.
Call to the honourable member for order. The call to the honourable member for Sturt.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. What measures is the Albanese Labor government taking to protect human health after the detection of H5 bird flu, and why is it important to take this seriously? Are there any alternative approaches being put forward?
Give the call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, and thank you to my fellow South Australian, the terrific member for Sturt. As she knows, as we all know, I think, for years we've watched the rest of the world grapple with the impact of the H5N1 variant of avian flu. Over those 5 years, it's hit every continent except ours, devastating wildlife and upending industries like poultry and cattle, in particular, in almost every other country on the planet. And as the Minister for Agriculture, who is responsible for the nation's biosecurity, has already told the parliament, it's now been detected here, Mr Speaker, as we knew inevitably it would be at some point. Now, the numbers are still small and the cases are still confined to migratory birds, but we know from bitter experience overseas just how serious the risks are here. And that's why we've been working so hard over recent years across portfolios led by agriculture, but including environment and obviously health through the CDC, to make sure that we are as prepared as we possibly can be. Also working obviously with states who have a very important role here as well. Now, opposition members who've also been watching this unfold across the world have recognised that work and they've offered their support. The Deputy Nationals leader, who's not here right now, the member for Maranoa, a number of others as well, and we thank them for that because they know how serious this could get. But, Mr Speaker, not everyone has been quite so constructive. The Liberal Senator, Senator Antic, last night, remarkably even for him, described the H5N1 avian flu, and I quote, as spin from pharmaceutical companies, all designed, in his view, to push people into getting a flu shot this winter. All another vast conspiracy, managing in one speech, Mr Speaker, not only just to spread dangerous ideas about vaccination, but also to minimise and even mock this variant of avian flu and the risk we know it poses to some incredibly important industries in this country. Now, if you don't watch Senate Estimates After Dark, you might not know who Senator Antic is, but he is one of the most influential members in the opposition, certainly the most influential member in the South Australian Liberal Party. He helped gather the numbers for this guy to roll the former member for Farrer. He's the leader of the opposition's hand-picked candidate to become president of the South Australian Liberal Party, a nice sidekick to Tony Abbott, Mr Speaker. And maybe that's why, in the 24 hours since he gave that speech, we've heard nothing from the Leader of the Opposition. Absolutely nothing. Just showing again, as we've seen in this debate about multiculturalism, this man lacks the spine for difficult decisions and real leadership.
call to the honourable member for Ryan.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. A minimum 25% tax on gas exports has proven to be one of the most popular policies with the Australian public. Despite this, you've chosen to listen to the gas industry over everyday Australians. Will you listen to the people and hold a national plebiscite for a gas tax?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member for Ryan suggests that from some of the campaign which has been had publicly, that somehow gas companies or other companies in the resources sector don't pay tax, and that there's no company tax, there's no resource tax. The PRRT does not exist and will not grow in the future. It also ignores the work that we've done in two areas. The work that we've done on the gas reservation of 20% of exports, which is very important. In Western Australia, the former WA Labor government brought in a gas reservation that has served the people of WA well. But on the East Coast, that has not happened. That has been inadequate from governments of all persuasions in dealing with this challenge. We're dealing with it. We're getting it done. We're consulting with industries to make sure that it happens. The other thing that we've done, and the unspoken suggestion from some as part of this campaign, is that we should just tear up contracts that are made with our trading partners. And if the member says no, that that's not the case, then I welcome the fact that they are saying that. But in the public campaign, that's certainly not a part of it. And the truth is that in recent times, one of the things that we have been able to rely upon is that we are a reliable trading partner. So, in spite of the fact that some said that I shouldn't go to Singapore and Brunei and Malaysia, that we shouldn't engage with China and Japan and the Republic of Korea to make sure that our supplies of diesel and petrol and aviation fuel was here. We have in part been able to achieve the outstanding outcomes that we have through Export Finance Australia, through the work with our trading partners, because we are a reliable trading partner and we do honour contracts and will continue to do that.
Call to the honourable member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. Can the Minister update the House on the national threat assessment provided last night by the Director-General of ASIO? And what role do we all play in helping to keep Australians safe?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And I thank the member for Robertson and acknowledge the significant role that he plays on the PJCIS, the Intelligence Committee, and acknowledge the members on both sides of the House for the role that is responsibly played by members of that committee in dealing with national security. As the Director-General made clear last night, our threat alert level remains at probable, but the level above probable of expected can only be reached when there is very specific intelligence about an immediate attack, and we are not in that situation. Therefore, the Director-General wanted to make the point very clearly to everyone: we should not presume that because the threat alert level remains at probable that we are at the same spot as to where we were when it was first put at that level a couple of years ago. We are not. He predicted in his last year's speech that the threat dynamic by 2030 would be more dynamic, more diverse and degraded. Only 12 months later, he said what he had predicted would be the case by 2030. We are already there. Global tensions, new technology and the temperature of debate in the country have all contributed to a heightened security situation for Australia. He highlighted in particular, while all forms of bigotry have the capacity to lead to violence, the fact that with anti-Semitism, almost every violent group comes together on this, whether it is ISIS-inspired groups, whether it is neo-Nazis or whether it is conspiracy theorists. But he also highlighted that direct traditional forms of terrorism are not the only threats that we deal with. something that we would regard all objectively as a terrorist act with the burning at the Adass Israel synagogue, was not what traditionally had been the operating method. We know now that it was directed by Iran in an act of foreign interference, using organised crime, combining communal violence and politically motivated violence into an act of state-sponsored terrorism. There are multiple forms of bigotry and every one of them can lead to violence. The Director-General referred to summer alone, where in December we had the horrific anti-Semitic terrorist attack at Bondi. In January we had a very near miss, where it will be alleged in court that the intention was there for that bomb to go off in Perth, which could have been a mass casualty event directed by bigotry against First Nations Australians. And in February, another arrest in another part of WA for someone whose bigotry was directed against politicians, against government, against police and against Muslims. There are two specific instructions that have been given to each and every one of us that can work to keep Australians safe. When people know of anything they think might be of concern, regardless of the form of bigotry, they should contact the National Terrorism Hotline, the National Security Hotline, 1800 123 400. And secondly, as the Prime Minister reflected in those words earlier, we all have a responsibility to take the temperature down to keep our nation safe.
Give the call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the House of Representatives.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. I refer to the Minister's previous answer. When did the Minister first become aware that the government's changes to capital gains tax and negative gearing imposed a new death tax on widows, divorcees and victims of domestic violence?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I think the government's made clear in several statements that this is an issue that we've been aware of for some time, and the Treasurer has spoken about the government's deliberations. Those opposite will have the opportunity to have their further say about how this is legislated, because it will come back in the second tranche of legislation. Thanks.
The call to the honourable member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering important infrastructure projects across Australia, and what other approaches to infrastructure is the government being asked to consider?
Give the call to the Minister for Infrastructure, the Minister for Transport and Regional Development and the Minister for Local Government.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the member for Bennelong for the question? It was an absolute pleasure to join with him last month to turn the sod on a brand new electric bus depot in Macquarie Park. The Australian and New South Wales governments are contributing $115 million each to this depot, which will house, charge and operate 150 buses with facilities for 160 staffs. This new depot will really turbocharge the transition to electric buses at a time when diesel prices continue to fluctuate across the globe. It makes common sense to be making these investments. The investments are not just happening in New South Wales. Over in Perth, we've invested $125 million in charging infrastructure to power 130 locally manufactured electric buses, and in Brisbane, of course, we've invested $400 million in the all-electric metro program. And we're continuing to invest across the country in transport routes from road to rail, whether it be the completion of Metronet or today the start of construction of the new Swan electric ferry fleet, the suburban rail loop and North East Link in Melbourne, providing critical links across Melbourne's suburban network. We're also spending money on other rail connections between Logan and the Gold Coast, one of Australia's fastest-growing corridors. Investments in the Bruce Highway, including works starting this week south of Bundaberg, and the big budget investments like the Gateway Motorway at Dolly's Rocks Road Stage 2. Further south, TBMs are on site to commence tunnelling for Torrens to Darlington. And in Western Sydney, our airport is getting ready to open in July and passengers in October. This is the sort of city-shaping infrastructure you can deliver when you have a government focused on doing its job, delivering the infrastructure Australia needs. And with the House and Senate sitting this week debating consumer protection laws for aviation passengers, I was a bit surprised to see my counterpart, alongside One Nation member for New England, finding the time to prioritise attending a right-wing think tank over in London, talking Australia down, telling this audience of climate catastrophism that young people should pony up and that universities that don't teach monocultural values should have their funding cut. So while two members of the right-wing party opposite think it's more important to address the Alliance of Responsible Citizenship and the third right-wing party here in this place spins its wheels, we are getting on with the job of delivering infrastructure in regional Australia, in suburban Australia, right the way across the country, doing the job every single day of delivering for the Australian people the infrastructure that they need.
Give the call to the honourable member for Clark.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Communications. Minister, I've spoken to many post office licensees, and it's clear that Australia Post is running them out of business as it morphs into a parcel delivery service. This gels with the move away from perpetual licences and the revelation that the board supports reactivating licence buybacks. It also puts the recent closure of the West Hobart LPO in a very different light. Minister, this will have severe impacts on communities. Will you stop it?
Call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for Clark for his question, and I think I might speak for everyone here when I say we love our local post offices, that many communities, particularly regional and rural communities, are dependent upon them. Australia Post represents more than just a post office. It is a hub for the community and for banking and for other services that would otherwise be non-existent in these areas. No one likes to see them close. Regrettably, sometimes they have to close, particularly if a licensee operator hands back the licence. It's not something that Australia Post can control, but it is something that Australia Post must manage. Under our system, Australia Post is a government-owned corporation. It has a board and an executive who make decisions about the post office network. The corporation must be sustainable. It needs to cover its costs. But within that framework, the government expects Australia Post to meet its community standards, and in particular, the government requires that Australia Post maintains a minimum of 4,000 post offices, a number that it currently exceeds. As I said, in some cases, and for a range of reasons like sickness or retirement or personal circumstances, licensed post offices do close suddenly. Often this happens with very little notice, both to its customers and to Australia Post itself. In my own community, Pinkenba licensed post office is suddenly closing, like the member for Clark. I know that will impact my community in Lilly. I'm happy to arrange a meeting for the member for Clark with the CEO of Australia Post about his specific concerns in West Hobart, just as I'm raising my own concerns about Pinkenba. The member has raised some broader concerns about the licensee network. Australia Post is working with its licensees to modernise the arrangements that govern those commercial relationships. The licensing model is decades old. It has served Australia Post and Australia very well over that time. But we cannot ignore that things are changing and that arrangements between Australia Post and its licensees must reflect that. You only need to look at the mobile phones in your pockets to understand why. There is a dramatic decline in the letter business. There is a dramatic decline in the retail foot traffic. All of that must be considered, not just by Australia Post, but for the licensing networks, many of whom are mum and dad small businesses in our communities. The government will continue to work with Australia Post and all stakeholders to ensure that it remains financially sustainable and continues to meet the needs of our Australian community. I'm confident that if we all work together in good faith, Australia Post and our valued licensees will renew their partnership for many years to come.
Give the call to the member for Reid.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How has the Albanese Labor government acted to help Australians with fuel and energy prices? What policies would see Australians paying more for their fuel and electricity?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and the Minister for
Many
Energy.
thanks, Mr Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for the question and thank her for what she does to represent part of the world here in Canberra. Mr Speaker, right around Australia, households are making decisions and choices about reducing their own energy bills and their fuel bills, and the Albanese government is backing them in those choices. For example, Mr Speaker, we are backing the 451,428 households that have chosen to put in a cheaper home battery under the Albanese government's cheap home battery scheme, Mr Speaker. When we came to office, 1 in 60 Australian houses had the benefit of reduced bills from a home battery. Today, that figure is 1 in 17. From 1 in 60 to 1 in 17. Another choice that Australians are making, Mr Speaker, is the choice to buy electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles. And when we came to office, an electric vehicle was sold in Australia once every 50 minutes. 50, once every 50 minutes. Today, the equivalent figure is once every 3 minutes, Mr Speaker. Australians taking up choices. And what they are doing, in many instances, Mr Speaker, is taking up the choice of increased models that are now available thanks to the new vehicle efficiency standards introduced by the Albanese government, opposed by those opposite. When the Minister for Transport and I argued in this House for new vehicle efficiency standards to give Australians more choice, the opposition argued that was a terrible thing. And we have seen the choice of models triple in Australia since the new vehicle efficiency standards came in, and now a third of the models are available for under $60,000, and now there are 15 models available for under $40,000, really opening up more choices for Australians, and that's a good thing. Now, the honourable member for Reid asked me what policies would see Australians paying more for fuel and electricity. Well, abolishing the cheaper home batteries policy would do that, Mr Speaker, and abolishing the electric vehicle tax cut would do that, and abolishing the new vehicle efficiency standard would do that as well. And honourable members don't need to take my word for it. They could listen. I know you won't hear me say this very often, Mr Speaker, but they could listen to the Liberal Party, because the Liberal Party went to the last election proposing to abolish the new vehicle efficiency standards, and when they snuck out their costings just before the election, we saw the implications of this, because they had to release the Parliamentary Budget Office costing, and it said this proposal to abolish the standards would be expected to increase the fiscal and underlying balance of the government. What does that mean? More taxes. And in fact, it went on to say this impact reflects the increase in the fuel excise that will be paid. How much, Mr Speaker, I hear honourable members asking? $600 million more paid in petrol tax because they would abolish the new vehicle efficiency standards. This is the party that pretends to be for low taxes, but whenever they get an opportunity, they actually argue for higher taxes, Mr Speaker, and argue against Australians having the choice of vehicle, which we introduced and will defend.
Has concluded. Give the call to the member for Macpherson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question's to the Minister for Housing. I refer to the Minister's previous answer that the government was, and I quote, aware for some time. Can the Minister confirm, was this before or after the handing down of the federal budget?
Give the call to the Minister for Housing, Minister for Home Assistance, Minister for Cities.
Thanks so much, Speaker. And I appreciate this question, Speaker. We are aware of the issues that the member is raising. We're working through them in the usual way. This will be resolved in a future piece of legislation. I look forward to engaging with the member when it comes forward.
The call to the honourable member for Griffith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government making it easier for Australians to see a doctor when they need urgent care? How are urgent care clinics helping to strengthen Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect?
The call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Griffith, who's hosted me in Brisbane a couple of times over the last fortnight. We visited the Coorparoo Medicare Urgent Care Clinic the week before last. At the same time, I visited the Carina and Carindale Medicare Urgent Care Clinic, which services the electorate of Bonner. And I was back again last week at the South Brisbane Urgent Care Clinic, with which the member is very, very familiar. That has been established for a while now. It's seen 35,000 patients, and the member and I spoke to a couple of patients, Sophie and Tony, who'd been there separately. Sophie's among my mum of young children, Speaker, and she's been there already 3 times. And she told us how grateful she was to have an urgent care service close to her home so she didn't have to go to the local hospital. She also, as the member knows, managed to take the opportunity to lobby me about some other health funding issues, which just reminds us of the Boundless initiative from the south side of Brisbane, Mr Speaker. But I'm also pleased to report that last week the Caloundra Urgent Care Clinic opened in the electorate of Fisher. I see the member for Fisher nodding. I think he's saying thank you. I can't quite hear him. It is number 137, Mr Speaker, and the last of the clinics we committed to over the last two elections. In 2022, we promised 50 urgent care clinics and we delivered 87, Mr Speaker. And last year we promised another 50 and we've delivered every single one of them by the end of June 26, as we said we would. Delivered every single one of them. They're all open, they're all operating 7 days a week, extended hours, and importantly, Mr Speaker, they're fully bulk billed. I've already seen more than 3.2 million patients, Mr Speaker, and now the network is up and fully operating. They'll see about 45,000 people every week, or more than 2.2 million patients every single year, getting high-quality urgent care in their community completely free of charge. Now 4 in 5 Australians live within a 20-minute drive of a Medicare urgent care clinic. And importantly, Mr Speaker, really importantly, around half of those patients say they otherwise would have gone to a busy emergency department. So we're also taking pressure off our public hospital systems. Mr Speaker, from the time the Prime Minister and I first announced this new urgent care clinic model has been a central part of our plan to strengthen Medicare, delivering more doctors, delivering more bulk billing, delivering cheaper medicines and delivering urgent care clinics so we can build a healthier Australia.
Call to the honourable member for Wentworth.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Last night, ASIO Chief Mike Burgess said social media was, and I quote, promoting discord and inflammatory rhetoric, exacerbating polarisation and creating a permissive environment for violence. My community has experienced that violence directly at Bondi and in the anti-Semitic online hate directed at the Jewish community. Social media algorithms feed extremism and polarisation. Will the government make algorithms opt out on social media as part of its duty of care bill to protect our community from online extremism?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Wentworth for her very important question. And the speech of the Director-General of ASIO was a very important contribution to the nation's safety and security. We think about safety and security as being about our defence forces. We think about it being the acts of terrorism that we saw with the anti-Semitic attack at Bondi Beach. But it can also be our safety and security can occur tragically, as we know, in the bedroom of one of the children around Australia, where the parents are not conscious about what they are having access to. That can also lead to a loss of life, and tragically has led to the loss of too many young lives. The digital duty of care will take the principles that we have enshrined with the bipartisan support for our social media ban and look at ways in which we'll consult about how we extend that duty that we have even further. We know that, as the member has said, algorithms drive people towards more and more extreme positions. So they start off in a mainstream positions, talking about ethnicity perhaps or faith, and they end up over a period of time receiving in their inbox, not just children, adults as well, of course, can be impacted by this, with Nazi-level propaganda, with calls for violence. We know that, just to name one area that is of concern. Chatbots. The second is Notify apps. We are seeing as well, with some of these algorithms coming through, we're seeing increased presentations in our hospitals of young women who have been choked, strangled. We see anal tearing growing at an extraordinary, horrific rate because what too many young men are seeing online is normalising behaviour that is anything but normal. And we need to be really conscious as a society about this. We need to be conscious as a parliament about this. We need to be courageous about this. I think one of this parliament's finest moments was the social media ban. And that came primarily not from this parliament. That came from parents who'd lost their children and who took those personal tragedies and determined that they would make a difference for others, so others didn't have to go through that traumatic experience. So this is something that is not simple. It's something that we've worked with. We've increased the funding for the eSafety Commissioner by 4 times. We've introduced fines of $49.5 million to be available for breaches of the social media ban aimed at young people. But clearly we are going to need to do more, and that's what the digital duty of care is about. So I encourage people to participate in this. The government's considering as well comments from the eSafety Commissioner and work that will require a further strengthening of the social media ban. And I look forward to receiving the same support from across this parliament that we received for the legislation. We're working on that as a priority because this is something that other generations didn't have to deal with, which is why it's complex. We can't allow the power that these companies, which are unaccountable, which get massive amounts of funding, of profit, and have extraordinary power. We need to make sure that Australians are in charge of this, but indeed the global community is dealing with this as well, which is why we should be proud as a nation that at least 16 countries have followed our social media ban, but there's more to do.
Give the call to the honourable member for Braddon.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to get more young people from disadvantaged backgrounds and the regions into university? What policies would see fewer people get the opportunity to go to university?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Can I thank my friend, the brilliant member for Braddon, for a question? Mr Speaker, I've told the House many times that almost 50% of young Australians in their 30s today have a university degree, but not everywhere. Not in the western suburbs of Sydney, where I grew up, where it's about half that. Not in regional Australia, not in the bush either, where it's even lower. And that's not because of a lack of talent. Talent is everywhere. It's opportunity that's not, and it's education that can change that. That's why the reforms we're implementing to fix the funding of our schools is so important, and tying that to reform to help more kids finish high school and then go on to TAFE or to university. That's why it's important that we change the way we fund our universities as well, and that's what the legislation I introduced today is all about. If you're a kid from a poor background or from the regions or the bush, and you get the marks or you've got what it takes to take on a university degree, then we'll guarantee a funded place for you at university. And not just that, we'll also give you extra support, not just to get to, but to get through university as well. And that's important because we know that kids from regional Australia, kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, are about twice as likely as other kids to drop out of university in the first year at university. Now, what does this mean in practice? If you're a kid from a disadvantaged background, you're growing up in Albury, Wodonga or Dubbo or Wagga or Burnie or Bendigo or Rockhampton, Cairns, Townsville, it means more than doubling the amount of funding to help you finish your degree with things like extra academic support, tutoring and mentoring, from $600 a student to more than $1,500. Now, this is the sort of thing that I'd hope my old mates in the National Party will support. But it's too late, because the Liberal Party have already told us that they're against it. And not just that, we've had a National Party senator just make a speech in London, of all places, saying that she thinks we should break Australian universities. So we want to open the doors of our universities to more kids from the bush and the regions. They want to stop them getting more funding to get through university and want to break universities. What is going on here? You've got the Liberal Party, you've got the National Party and you've got One Nation all competing against each other to see who can be the most extreme, whether it's on education or multiculturalism or anything else. They're like the Neapolitan ice cream of Australian politics, Mr Speaker. The problem is they all want to be vanilla.
Prime Minister has the call. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the House will just resume his seat. The Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I ask further questions be placed on the notice paper.